Hi, welcome back to Wild on Wheels. Today we're going to be doing part 2 of this 500,000 mile LS engine teardown. I filmed this video, I've filmed a couple weeks ago, and so I've already got the engine completely torn down. But because there was a bunch of you guys that actually asked some questions about things that maybe I missed or didn't look at, I wanted to go ahead and address those and talk about it. And right here in the beginning, before we dive into this week's video that I already have filmed. All right, let's start with the first question. We have Jeffrey Ross from 5 days ago. Sir, will you show us the thrust bearing next week? Yes, Jeff, we're going to do the thrust bearing. Okay, so we've got a dial indicator set up right here. I've got it zeroed out. As you can see, if I just touch anything, it just moves all over the place. So let's get it to stop. I'm going to push in this way, then I'm going to pull back out, and we're going to see. Okay, so it should be forced all the way back. Let's pull it this way. Okay, so what do we got right here? Let's say 6 thousandths. Push it back in. And it goes back to the 0. Let me see if I can get you guys over here a little better. Can you see this? Let me adjust the dial slightly here. Try to get it exactly on. Okay, we're exactly on 0. You can see that. I'm going to go ahead and pull. That's as far as it'll go. So you can see we're exactly at 6 thousandths on the dot. Push it back in. Once the whole engine and everything stops weeble wobbling, we can see right there at 0. Okay, so we've got exactly 6 thousandths. Let's look at the book. See, what does it say? All right, here's the book. Engine mechanical, I believe specifications right here, LQ4. There we go. We got our gloves on because I'm trying to keep the book clean. Okay, so we have, where is it? In play. 1.5 to, let's call that 8. It's 78 thousandths, which would be 7.8 thousandths. So 1.5 thousandths to 7.8 thousandths. So let's just call that 1 to 8 thousandths. So we're at 6 thousandths. So we're still within play, within specification. Now, a lot of gunk on that one. Crusty gunk. Okay, here we go. First look, thrust bearings. You can obviously see there is some wear, right? But then like I said before, I mean, an engine with anything more than like, I don't know, 1,000 miles on it's gonna have some, you're gonna see some wear, right? Look at that. Look at that guy. Very nice. Let's look at this side. Same thing, just slight amounts of wear. You can even see like on outer surfaces, like right out in here, that they've never made contact with each other. Basically, they've just kind of self-clearanced. And they probably did that within the first few thousand miles and then never touched again. That's impressive. Basically nothing. I'm seeing this side's got way more thrust. And this is the side that would have been facing. Okay, so there's this side right here, the side that has the least amount of wear, more scuffing than anything, no polishing really, is the side that would be potentially receiving any thrust. Like if you had a manual transmission, you get a clutch, they would be pushing on this side of the thrust bearing. This side of the thrust bearing, which is facing towards the front, actually has a little more wear than anything. So we had some more forward thrust pushing backwards. But even still, it's virtually perfect. I can catch my fingernail on a couple of the grooves, but it's not bad. And like I said, I'd rather see grooves and nicks in this than on the journal of the crankshaft itself. And that is, there's nothing. You can see that sucker is just clean as a whistle. Let me zoom you guys in so you can see that a little better. I mean, just look at all of these though, really. Not a scratch, not a nick, nothing. Look at that. Just beautiful. Okay, so there's the thrust bearing for Mr. Jeffrey. Let's move on to the next guy's question. Perfect Fence 1530 looks like it still has, looks like it was still a perfectly good engine. Did you figure out if it was burning oil or leaking? It was 100% leaking oil. It was not burning oil. You can see in the video, I kind of show a couple of the spark plugs. Those things are perfectly clean, and they're just the lack of buildup on the piston and in the cylinder, in the head area. It definitely was not burning oil. You can see the actual spark plugs in their holes. We can see that none of these spark plugs had a lot of oil buildup on them, right? So we can see that the valves are not leaking oil. Here's the intake, and you can see, you would assume the intake's gonna be the cleanest part of the engine. Well, it's not, because it's EGR gases are flowing through that. And so you might be thinking, oh, well, your inside the cylinders are nasty, they're gunked up, they're disgusting. That has to be proof of engine oil leaking into the cylinders. You're burning oil, per se. No, because look at those intakes. Those intakes are black and crusty. They're actually dirtier inside of here. Like, that's not wiping off. That's crusty, nasty blackness. We were able to just wipe this off pretty easily, right? Even this crustier stuff up here. That's your EGR. Exhaust gas recirculation that's going on there. That's where all of this nastiness is coming from, the EGR, 100%. So so this nastiness here is from the EGR. There's the proof. Okay, and then we have, I'm not here to argue facts. Hello, I'm not here to argue facts. You had several questions, and they were all wonderfully great questions. So I want to try to answer as many of those as I can right here. It says, when changing the oil pickup O-ring, was the pan cleaned, or is it the sludge in the pan from the entire 500,000 miles? I will tell you this, I did, to my best that I can remember, I did clean out the pan, but I don't remember there being any more sludge in it at that point in time than was currently in it. As you can see, that sump area is actually kind of hard to get down into. So if I remember correctly, I think I just brake cleaned, and just rinsed it out real good, wiped it down, and then put it back on. But I don't remember there being like a ton of sludge in it at that point in time. Nothing, that would just obviously be like, wow, this thing's, okay. Did it ever overheat, or was just used for much towing? For towing, yes, this thing did a lot of towing. It did a lot of not towing as well. Out of the 500,000 miles, so when I purchased the truck, it was sold as new as a cabin chassis. It didn't have a bed on it. And so I actually purchased it from a grocery store chain called Bash's' here in Arizona. I think they might be in Southern California a little bit. I don't know. But it was one of their utility trucks. And so it came with a utility bed and a ladder rack on top of it. And so I think for probably the first 4 or 5 years, that's all that it really had. Obviously full of tools and whatnot, but it probably wasn't really all that heavy. Once I purchased it, at the time I was roofing. I was doing roofing. And so I literally all day, every day, towed around I want to say it was a 18-foot double axle hydraulic dumping trailer that had sides on it that were probably 5.5, 6 feet tall. And I hauled tear off from job sites to the landfill and back to the job sites. And that's all I did all day long. I had a company, I think we had 2 or 3 trailers. And so I'd go pick up a trailer, take it, dump it, go pick up materials, take it back to the first job site, go pick the second trailer up, dump it, so I was just constantly hauling loads around in the Prescott area with it. After I quit roofing, it just got your normal everyday kind of average pickup truck use. Home Depot runs, buddy's car broke down, go pick it up, bring it back home, things like that. It wasn't like towing all day, every day, but it did, trust me, it got its fair share of towing. Okay, overheating. Did it overheat? No, it got warm once. And by warm, I say 235 degrees-ish. I was pulling Sunset Hill here in Arizona, and the serpentine belt blew right as I was cresting the hill, and there is a Sunset Point exit, the rest stop there. And so I drove it that mile without a serpentine belt, so obviously the water pump wasn't spinning. Kept a really good close eye on the temperature and got it off the exit and parked it. But I think it got up to maybe 235. But I was, at any point in time, I was ready to shut it down and just coast it to wherever it stopped. I wanted to see how long a serpentine belt would last. 325,000 miles. It was dumb. And I didn't even keep a spare serpentine belt with me, knowing hey, this thing's terrible. It was cracked and brittle and little chunks missing. I knew it was a bad serpentine, but I kept looking at it. I'm like, wow, you're still working. And I didn't buy one and just keep it on me. So, yes. So it got hot, but not engine damage hot. Okay. And then I'm not here to argue facts. Says, please don't dangleberry it. Get a nice surface for some new rings to seal on. Yes, I do not plan on doing just a dingle ball hone. I just want to look at the engine and determine what would be the potential or the least amount of effort or work could you put back into this to bring it back up to as close as factory specifications and run it for an additional 500,000 miles. That's what I'm trying to look for. We're going to get into this episode. You're going to see the cylinder condition a little better. I'm kind of on the fence, in all honesty, if it actually needs to be bored out. And you're going to see that here in a little bit. So doing a dingle ball hone actually might be the best thing that we could do for this engine. I don't know. But I assure you, when we go to put this engine back together, it's going to be as close to factory new standards as humanly possible by me. Like to see valve seats, and a better look at push rod ends, rocker sprockets, tips, and needle bearings. All right, so here is a rocker for cylinder number 1. So you can see, here's the face of it. Let's clean this up a little bit. Focus. As you can see, there's virtually no wear on that at all. I didn't press one of these out, but you can see down inside there the needle bearings. They look like they're all present and accounted for. I'm not seeing anything that's broken, missing. Also, this is very smooth, right? It's very smooth. It's not crunchy or chunky in any way. There is a little bit of play. I don't know if you can see that movement right there. I probably wouldn't reuse these. There's the cup right here, if you focus, where the push rod is going to ride. This guy right here rode right there the last 500,000 miles. Here's a close-up look at this push rod here. One of the things that I do want to do real quick, that's just one of those. Let's just grab another random one here real quick. And look, this is the passenger side. You can see it's less chunky than the driver's side. Driver's side is a lot blacker. Passenger side is a lot cleaner. Same kind of thing. Right here, we can see the face of this is actually virtually, I would not consider that to have any wear whatsoever. There's nothing I can catch my finger on. It's perfectly smooth. I'm not seeing any, chunky bits on the tips or anything like that. Down in here is perfectly clean and smooth, mirror smooth. And then, like you said, if we look down inside of here, look at those needle bearings. Maybe in the future, if I decide to not reuse these, I may go ahead and pull it apart and can actually physically look at the needle bearings inside there. But it is there's virtually no wear. Okay, so that was just another random one. But as you can see, passenger side, driver's side. Driver's side's much darker in appearance. So there's obviously more oil burning going on here and more just oil staining going on here. Okay, so push rod. We got one right here. Here is push rod. This is push rod for cylinder number 1. So here's more of an up close personal look. You can see this stuff right here. I'm actually going to grab some brake clean and an emery cloth here in a second. I want to see how well these guys clean up. But you can see right here, nice and straight. They're not warped. I don't have a piece of glass to like roll these guys on just to check and see how straight they are. But usually if they're bent with any kind of like actual severity, you can tell. Yes, in a high performance engine type situation, you're going to want to look and see if there's something that's got a 1/1000th of a bend in it, right? But I think for just your average everyday run-of-the-mill pickup truck, that bad boy is going to work just fine. Let me see if I can blow through it. Oh yeah, I can blow right through it, no problem. Zero clogs. I can actually see, if I can get up here on the camera. Can you see through the hole? Yep, right there. Boom. You can see right clean through it. So there's that. Let me grab some brake clean and an emery cloth. I want to try to see if I can't clean that up. Yeah, look at that. It's cleaning up really well. It wouldn't take much effort to just polish these bad dudes up and, they'd probably be perfectly fine, perfectly good to reuse. Okay, here's the head right here. Some of you may be wondering, which head do you have? What did it come with from the factory? Lots of different variations of heads from the factory. I don't know if you can see right there. We got a 317 Cincinnati 78. What brand and viscosity of oil did you use? I think I mentioned it at least twice in the last video, but if you're wondering, I use Castrol GTX high mileage 5W30. That's what GM specifies for this engine, 530 in all conditions, whether it's summer, winter, doesn't matter. 530, I use Castrol GTX high mileage. There's only one Castrol GTX high mileage. So I think that was one of the other questions. Was it full synthetic or not? I don't know. It's Castrol GTX high mileage. I think it's full synthetic. It's the green bottle. It's the Castrol GTX high mileage. It's in the green bottle. There's only one. They don't make like 4 different versions of it. That's the one that I used for. I'm just saying. Okay. The next comment that we have is Lanasil 7949. Very nice. Have not yet seen anyone look at such a high mileage LS, and this was great. More and more. I haven't either, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I've seen on YouTube, I've seen several people. I mean, just type in LS engine teardown. There's 400,000 videos of them, but I haven't seen anyone that's actually like, hey, here's a known guaranteed high mileage engine, because most of those are somebody's pulled an engine out of some junkyard vehicle and you can't verify if that's the original engine or not, if it's been rebuilt or not, how many miles are on the engine versus how many miles are on the vehicle. You can't tell, and they just take it, tear it apart. Wow, look at this, is all chewed up, it's all whatever. But this is verified. I can verify. I drove the miles personally myself. This has the 500,000 miles on it, and so as far as I know, this is the only one. So that's why I was like, I got to tear this apart and do a video on it so you guys can check it out, because this is something that is very, very intriguing to me. And to see the condition of this just goes to show you that it's not the engineer's fault if your engine doesn't last 500,000 miles. It's your fault. You didn't maintain it properly. You didn't change the oils properly. You didn't use good oils, good filters. You didn't take care of the engine. You just let it kind of degrade, and it's up to you. You determine how long the engine's going to run and how well it's going to run. JT Martin also said again, I'm going to say the oil rings are plugged or the rings are stuck, not allowing them to seal properly. We're going to get into the piston rings here in just a little bit. And yes, you're absolutely correct. The engine was worn out. And when we get to the pistons, we start getting into the cylinder, you're going to see this thing was way worn out. I'd be surprised if it definitely was not making advertised horsepower when I pulled it out. Let's put it that way. We have Selco Sucks. Nice name. How many 4L80Es did you go through in the 500,000 miles? One. At 350,000, I changed out the 4L8, the transmission. I was going to have the transmission just rebuilt. I wanted to keep the original transmission, just throw some new clutches in there, and maybe a few solenoids and whatnot, and just freshen it up, put it back together with a new torque converter. But unfortunately, when the transmission decided to go, it took out the housing. It just completely demolished it. The transmission guy said, I took it apart to try to salvage it. He said the clutches actually cut into the housing. He said the fact that it didn't actually break in half, or, what's that terminology that SpaceX uses? Unscheduled rapid disassembly of the transmission. He said he was actually shocked that that's not what happened. So I don't know exactly the cause of failure. The transmission guy's like, hey man, I tried. He says the housing was actually destroyed when the transmission went out. So I had to get a new transmission for it. So it's not the original transmission. But that was at 350. And like I showed you in the last video, I think I'm at 613,000 miles, something like that. Right now. So that transmission's been in there for what, 275,000 miles. And I'm kind of just planning on maybe about 700,000 changing it out. All right, so we checked a couple things that you guys requested last video. Now that you're gonna watch this week's video, maybe there's something else you're like, hey, now that I've seen part 1 and part 2, you might have some questions like, hey, you didn't look at this, you didn't look at that. What does this look like? You need something in a little more, closer detail. By all means, drop a comment down below and let me know. And if I get enough people asking questions about specific things, I might do a third video with just kind of like follow up with, here's all the questions everybody asked about everything. So with that being said, let's dive into this week's video real quick. Also, if you are enjoying this, if you feel like I did a good job, please subscribe. Like 99.4% of you are not subscribed. I've only got a little over 300 subscribers. I'm a really small channel. I'm trying to grow, and you can really help me out a lot with that, and I appreciate that a lot. So let's dive into this, and let's see what the rest of this engine looks like when we tear it down. We're gonna go ahead and continue with this teardown. Now, what I did do is this week while I was at work, I went ahead and grabbed a harmonic balancer puller from O'Reilly's. Now, just so you know, if you just go in there and ask them for, hey, I need a harmonic balancer puller tool, and I did the rental one, right? I need a harmonic balancer puller tool for an LS style engine. They're gonna say we don't have one. We have one for Chrysler. But if you look on the actual parts or the tool case, it does say on there that it works for Chrysler, lots of Chrysler engines, most Chrysler engines, but it also right at the very end says also works for GM engines. So what I did is I went ahead and just brought it home, and I pulled the bolt, used the little puller real quick to go ahead and pull off the harmonic balancer. Now I'll show you on these GM style harmonic balancers, or on the LS style, I should say, they have these 3 tabs, and that's what you actually use to pull it off. And so that tool is basically a small 3-jaw puller. It'll fit right inside the little slots. You give it like a little quarter turn. It hooks onto these tabs here. It comes with these nice push rods that you can stick down inside, and you find the one that's the correct length, and it adapts into the actual pusher bolt on the tool itself, and then it pops right off. Great tool. You can pull your harmonic balancer off without damaging a crankshaft at all. Works great. I had this thing off in just a couple minutes. It took me longer to set it up and find the right push rod than it did to actually pull it off. So we got that guy off. Now, the next thing that I want to do before we pull off the cover, I wanted to point something out to you. Look at this guy right here. This is the gasket for this housing, for this cover. And if you notice, there's this little roundy bit right here. And over here, there's a roundy bit. And I can see down inside of here, this should be flipped over 180 degrees. Now, like I told you before, I personally myself have never been into this engine. I've never dug into this engine. I've never pulled anything apart. I've never done anything to it. So I'm not the one that put this gasket on backwards, but I highly doubt that somebody at the GM factory put this gasket on backwards. I highly doubt that. But this may have been a point of one of our major engine oil leaks. And so that might be why this engine is so destroyed. That might be also one of the reasons why I was putting 2 or 3 quarts of oil in it at the end. At the beginning, this gasket would have been soft enough that it could have kind of, overcame that. But once this gasket started getting hard, I'm sure when we go to pull this, we'll be able to see a little gap. And that's probably where a lot of the oil was coming from. I don't know. So I'm kind of excited to see that. So somebody has been in here at some point in time before I bought the truck. But like I said, I bought the truck in 2006. It was only 5 years old. And, so this would have been a very early repair. Also, the truck was never taken to a Chevy dealer or had any warranty repairs done on the truck at all. The reason I know that is after I bought the truck, a couple years later, my ignition key was difficult. You had to kind of shake it and rattle it around to get the truck to start. And so I went down to the dealer and I had them get me a new key. And in order to do that, you have to show proof of ownership, right? You have to give them you have to bring in either the title or insurance card with your name on it, the vehicle VIN number, something like that, and your driver's license showing that I own the vehicle. And then they'll just sell you a key for like $10 or something like that. But when I went in there to get a new key, they told me, oh, hey, this truck has never had any warranty repair done to it. So here, and they came out like no joke with a cardboard box full of parts. Here's all of the parts for your truck that have recalls on them. And there was stuff, there was the knock sensors with the harness, which is actually a lot of money. Those $300 or $400 just for that. I don't know, there was tailgate cables, there was, I don't know, there's a handful of things in there, right? So this vehicle had never been in for any kind of warranty repair, which means that's kind of interesting to me because I feel like when I purchased it, it was just out of warranty as far as the years go. It was maybe a year out of warranty. So if this had been taken apart, it should have been done under warranty, right? Because the truck was 5 years old when I purchased it, and it was just out of warranty. So did somebody have to pull this off and put a new timing chain on it right before I purchased it? I don't know, right? But it would have been just outside of that warranty. So irregardless, this gasket being on backwards has hundreds of thousands of miles on it in this configuration. I would assume if they had taken it down to the dealer for any kind of warranty work, maybe it had a tick, maybe it had a issue running difficult, maybe a dealer tech would have, but the problem is when I went in, they said this vehicle has never been in for any warranty repair whatsoever. So if it had been taken to any Chevy dealer anywhere in the country, there would be there'd be something on the computer. They'd be able to look at it and be like, oh, this truck had these warranty repairs done over in Nashville, Tennessee, let's say, and now the truck is in Arizona, right? They would have a record of that. There was no record of this truck ever having been to any dealership for any warranty repair work at all, let alone just like came in for anything. I literally went in to just go buy a new key for the ignition, and they came out with a box full of parts and said, here's all the warranty parts for your vehicle. You know, you can put them on yourself or we can do it for you. And I was like, nah, just let me have them, I'll put them on. So this hasn't, as far as I know, ever been taken apart. Now it's very odd that that's potential for this came from the GM factory. I just don't see that being possible. But, you know, like I said, maybe just out of warranty, somebody needed to do something in here. Maybe they just changed out the front main seal. Maybe it was leaking. Maybe there was a leak around the gasket area. I don't know. And somebody just pulled the cover off, put a new gasket on there, put a new lip seal in there, put it back together. Maybe something as simple as that, or I don't know. Maybe this came like this from the factory. Who knows? Let me get the engine turned over. I want to get it turned over to number 1 top dead center, because the next thing that I want to check, I want to see how retarded is the cam. That was one of the questions I got from one of my viewers. Said, hey, I want to know after 500,000 miles, how retarded is the cam? Is there tooth wear, a chain stretch, things like that? I personally myself have never changed the cam gear, the chain, anything like that. So how much stretch is in the chain? What does the chain look like? And is the cam actually retarded, right? And so to do that, we'll spin this around, get it to number 1 top dead center, and see how far off the timing marks are on the cam and the crankshaft. So that's I'm excited to take a look at that. So let's do that next. Let's get this guy off. Did I miss any bolts? We don't have anything down here. Okay. Ziploc baggie. When I do my Ziploc baggies, I like to do lots of Ziploc baggies. I would prefer to have lots of Ziploc baggies with just a few bolts. And I know, hey, this is just the front cover. This isn't the front cover and the water pump because then you're going to potentially get bolts mixed up. You don't have to go get the Ziploc brand. You know, those are expensive. Just go down to Family Dollar or your dollar store down the street or whatever and get the cheapest ones you can find. They're just to hold the bolts. That's it. And as long as they can hold the bolts, you're good to go. Now, a little warning for you guys, they do not hold up in sunlight very well. So you can't like have these and then put them in these baggies and stick it on the engine and have it sit outside in the backyard for 6 months before you come back. The bags will disintegrate and fall apart. So you have to keep them inside. And the thing is, being in the Ziploc baggies, they don't have to be with the engine. You could stick them on a shelf in your garage or in your shop and have the engine sitting somewhere else and be okay. But you want to keep those out of the sun. They do deteriorate. Okay, let's pry this guy off. Maybe. A little tab right here. There we go. All right. Front cover came off, and as you can see, there is a full-blown gap right there. Look at that. So that right there would have been a massive oil leak. Any oil coming up in this general vicinity would absolutely, you can see my finger through here. So that's interesting. You can also see it was like that for a very, very long time. There's actually the color of the oil, right? So this guy was just simply put on backwards by somebody. I don't know who, and I don't know when. This is the way it was installed, and as you can see, that nice little right there, right? Let's get it lined up. That's the way it was installed, and this is the way it should have been installed. That's the way it should have been installed, because as you can see, that little bump out right there matches this little right here. That's the way it should have been installed, but it was installed backwards. And it was like that for a very, very long time. That's interesting. That's very interesting to me. Also, just this thick grime and grit. That right there was probably because oil was coming out. This probably wasn't getting as lubricated as it needed to be. Look how much play is in that. That's interesting. Okay, so let's pull off, this right here is your oil pump. So let's pull off the oil pump real quick. Now, one of the other things that I like to do with these baggies real quick is see all 4 of those bolts are the exact same length. It doesn't matter when you go to put it back together which bolt goes in which position. But let's say you pull a component off that does have 2 longer bolts or medium length bolts, and it may be difficult to, let's say in 6 months when you go to put this back together, which one was the long bolt and the medium bolt, you can easily draw a quick diagram on this and say, point, 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 point. It doesn't have to be exactly accurate, and you just go long, long, medium, medium, short, short. Put them in there. Then when you come back and you go to pull it out, you know exactly where each of them go. So here's our oil pump. As you can see, it just slides right off. You can see inside of here, there's these teeth, and those teeth actually grip right here onto the crankshaft, which is actually the timing gear for the crankshaft timing gear, which is right here, and it just keys on. So if the crank is spinning, this oil pump is also spinning. Okay, so here we are here. Let's look and see. There should be a timing mark on the crankshaft here. All right, so we have our timing mark right here. I'm going to mark it so we can see it easier. There's our camshaft timing mark, and then right here is our crankshaft timing mark. So hopefully you guys can see that. This guy right here is our #1 cylinder. On GM, the driver's side front cylinder is #1. I think it's the same on everything. Just driver's side front. So we're going to spin this over till we hit #1 top dead center, which we are on compression. Actually, this is exhaust, because as you can see, that is not lining up with that. So we have to do #1 top dead center compression. So let's get this guy around, and being able to see the crankshaft right here, I can get it exact. Okay, right there. Okay, so that timing mark, we got our cylinder, it's perfectly straight up and down. We have our, this line right here, this mark is also perfectly straight up and down. And as you can see, it looks like it's super accurate, but look at this. That's just play in the chain. See, look, I could pull on the chain this way, it moves. I pull on the chain this way, it moves that way. Now, as the engine is spinning, it's spinning in this direction, which is going to be pulling on this side of the chain. So this side of the chain will be tight, this side of the chain will be loose. So let's pull on the chain to mimic the engine is spinning. And then let's look and see how many degrees off that is. That's a lot. I can just see right here with my eyeballs. Okay, now I don't have, they make a specific tool, a very specific tool. It's this huge dial. You mount it to this thing, you calibrate it, you adjust it, you put this little wire on there, it shows you exactly the degree, and then you can move it back and forth. It's super precise. I don't have that tool, so what I'm going to be doing is we're going to be setting it like this, straight up and down, try to get it as level as possible, and then what I'm going to do is align the center of this hole and then align the edge of my phone, and then rotate it over. And this is probably not going to be very accurate, because it's saying about 1 degree. Yeah, it's showing like maybe like 1 degree difference, but I probably don't have this perfectly aligned. So I would say I'm probably 1 degree this way, just, eyeballing it, approximately 1 degree advanced on this, and approximately 1 degree retarded on that. So we have about 2 degrees of play. Now our back and forth, there's probably at least 2 degrees. You know, it probably could do. Let's do this. We could just do basically like an average. So these 2 bolts, the average of these 2 bolts is 4 degrees, right? In this maximum position. Okay, and that's 1 degree. You can see that 1 degree. So it's only off by about 1 degree, which in all honesty, the engine ECM can compensate for that very easily. I think the engine ECM can compensate for several degrees, you know, but that's fine. Now, the chain being this loose, I'm not seeing like crazy amounts of wear. Obviously, it's a pretty loose chain, and we have this much wiggle, this much movement in it, which isn't, you know, when we put it back together new, there will be 0 movement. Like you put this on, it's going to be locked into position and it's going to be tight. This chain's going to be tight. You know what I'm saying? Like you're going to have to like work it on there. There's not going to be this much play, but that's a lot less than I anticipated. Let's go ahead and pull this off. And I think this is pressed on, so we'll probably end up leaving this gear on the crankshaft for now, but let's get the camshaft gear off, let's get the chain off, and let's go ahead and pull the camshaft out next. I want to measure the camshaft and see how wore out is the camshaft. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of these bolts back in here. I'm actually probably going to put all 3. Just finger tight. There's actually dirt like embedded down inside. And that right there is probably the most alarming part. You can see now I can move the camshaft. I can't pull the camshaft out because I have this cover plate. So let's get this cover off real quick. We'll pull the camshaft. Get that off right there. We can see there is a little bit of RTV on here, not very much. And that looks like there's an oil passage, and this is just a crossover for these oil passages here. Okay, for small parts like this guy, I'll go ahead and just throw it in the Ziploc baggie along with the hardware. That way you don't have to worry about losing it. Okay, so now we got that guy out. Let's pull the camshaft out. And this is why I put those bolts, the 3 bolts back in there. Gives me a little something I can kind of grab onto. We're going to do a little rotate back and forth as we pull so we can kind of overcome some of these frictions. It is a little bit tricky. I don't think I can get to it. There we go. You want to be gentle while doing this. This is the most damage that you can do to an engine is removing and installing the camshaft. Now, I'm not going to be reusing this camshaft or these bearings, so I'm kind of just yanking her out of there. If you were pulling this apart just to clean it, verify it, put it back together, then this is not, you would be using a camshaft removal tool, this big long rod. You'd be using hooks running through here to help support the back side of the camshaft to slowly and gently work the camshaft out. The reason for that is the sides of these lobes are very sharp. They're not machined smooth, they're actually very sharp. You could probably not cut yourself on them, but they're sharp. Your bearings are made out of a very soft material, generally aluminum or lead or copper, of something soft, soft metal like that. And so what happens is if you run one of these sharp edges of one of your lobes across one of the bearings as you're putting it in, you'll put a big gouge in the bearing, and now you've lost your lubricating properties for that bearing. The bearing are these large lobes, circular lobes. That's where the bearings are that support the camshaft on the inside of the engine. So for me, I'm just kind of So you can see right here, here's one of the bearing lobes, like this guy right here. And now, so that one's lined up, that one's lined up, that one's lined up, right, all the way down. Everything's nice and smooth. But then as soon as I go to pull it out, now I'm not riding on the bearing here, I'm not riding on the bearing here, I'm not riding. Now, this is the point in which I would run the risk of catching the side of one of these lobes on one of the bearings as I'm pulling it through. So carefully, gentlely, right? Then you got to line, now you have to line up the bearings again. So it's got to be perfectly straight. Now we can pull through the next bearing. Now we have 2 bearings out. There's probably 2 bearings left inside of there. Then we work through that bearing, gently, carefully, pull it through. Now we have 2 bearings left. Gently, carefully, pull it through. Last bearing. Pull it through gently, carefully. There we go. Camshaft is out. Okay, so we have the camshaft out, and I just took a couple pieces of 2x3, cut some, used a, just cut 45-degree wedges out of it, just cut a little triangle out. So now I have some V-blocks. I used a couple screws just to kind of, hold them onto the wood here, so it's not going to go anywhere, onto the workbench. And then I just took can't really see it, but just took a piece of metal, screwed that onto the workbench here so I could magnetize, connect my dial indicator. So right here I got my dial indicator set up. I've got it zeroed out, and we're going to be checking this main bearing here. It's the middle one. If there's any bend in this cam, it's going to be most evident here. And by making these little V blocks here, I can spin this camshaft around, and it's not going to try to roll away, right? So let's watch that. Let's try to get a full 360 degrees out of this. I'm going to use this little dowel right here, being our starting and stopping point. We are smack dab on 0, so let's give this a shot. Keep an eye on that. Okay, now as you can see, if I just push on the table, we're getting, a half a thou. If I push over here, if I push here, we're getting several thou, right? So I have to be very careful about how much force I'm putting on this. I could be skewing the results a little bit. But if you ask me, I'm going to say we're probably somewhere in the 1,000ths, the region of approximately 1,000ths. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to measure an intake lobe and an exhaust lobe here next, and just see, you could, if you were going to I want to know if I can reuse this, how far out of spec is this, can I just slap this back in and expect like new performance out of this? You'd want to measure every single stinking one of these things. I'm not going to. Looking at these, they all look very similar, right? I'm not seeing anywhere here. This is going to be your highest wear point right here, right at the peak of your lobes. That's going to be your highest wear points, right? And what you're going to be feeling for, and you're going to want to use your fingernail, right? Or you're going to want to use an O-ring pick. Now, you're not going to gouge and scratch at it, but very lightly feel for any scratches or gouging. You want to see, obviously you can tell just by looking at this where the lifter was riding and where it was not riding, right? So this is the highest point right here. These are the lowest points. It wasn't even touching the entire surface of that, but then we kind of roll it around a little bit. See how suddenly it goes from narrow right here to suddenly wide, right? So I don't think that's anything necessarily to worry about, but I just want to feel and see, is there a high spot? Is there a ridge, right? I'm not feeling any ridges. I'm not feeling any scratches, right? Nothing, the pick isn't catching on something. It's not, we're not getting any of that. Okay, it's just nice and smooth. I'm not feeling anything on any of these that's making me go, oh, I need to double check this one, right? And that's what we're just going to do, is kind of check all of these and just see. It might be a little scuzz, it might be a little something, but these all feel very clean. Not feeling any gouges or any scratches on any of this, right? Also, just your fingers. You can feel, you'd think like, oh, something that's maybe only a thousandths off, you can feel that with your finger. You can feel that. You can feel a ridge or something that's not exactly perfect, right? So these don't feel weird, right? I'm not feeling any gouges. I'm not feeling any depressions. I'm not feeling like a worn area. I'm not seeing any signs of what's called contact rolling stress fatigue. And that's where something has just ridden across that under extreme tension for such a long period of time. It'll actually look like, you've seen, okay, here's an absolute perfect example of contact rolling stress fatigue. Asphalt. You see asphalt road, and it's all broken into little pieces. There's little chunks just, and they haven't come through and put the tar, you know, they squirt the tar down into the little cracks, right? But you go across a road and it's all just kind of, you know, that is a prime example of contact rolling stress fatigue. The car driving on the asphalt is that rolling stress fatigue on the asphalt. And what's happening is the bedding underneath the asphalt, the dirt, whatever they put underneath it, isn't able to support the weight of the vehicle. And so it's flexing underneath the vehicle. And it does that enough times. And now suddenly you have cracks that begin to form, but they form into just little pieces, just little chunks of asphalt. And they're all like jigsawed together, right? It's still got asphalt covering the area, but they're all these little jigsaw pieces, right? That's a large scale example of contact rolling stress fatigue. And you will potentially actually see that on something like this. So that's something you want to check. And the reason I brought up the asphalt example is it'll look like that. There'll be a bunch of little teeny tiny little fractures going in all different directions. It'll look like a jigsaw puzzle piece with just a bunch of whatevers. And you may even see the surface finish chipped off and missing in a few pieces. So what they do is this is just made out of a piece of mild steel. They heat it up glowing red hot and then they quench it. What that does is that creates a very hard surface, just a few thousandths of an inch thick, maybe 2 thousandths. Very thin, but it's also fairly thick considering, right? So you can actually see where that hardened material will break away from the softer material underneath and chip off the hard material, exposing the soft material underneath. That would be like some asphalt. It's got that cracks in it. You know, the whole area is kind of cracked out. And that would be like somebody coming by and pulling one of those little jigsaw pieces out and flipping it off to the side. And that's the beginning of a pothole. Same concept with this. Little piece chips off. Now you've exposed the soft material underneath. This wheel, this roller on this lifter, hence roller lifters. The roller is made out of hardened metal. So now this hard wheel will be harder than that little chunk of soft metal underneath the hard piece that went away. And now a divot creates. Now you've expanded, created focalized stress points on all of the other hardened metal around it. Chunks start going missing, disappearing. It deteriorates very quickly. If you had that and a chunk of the hardened material off the top came off, man, if you got like a week's worth of driving out of that thing before the camshaft just I'd be surprised. It goes quick. Okay, so 1 thousandths out around. We'll check the spec for this. We'll see what that is. But let's check. I'm just going to use. Let's use these two. I'm going to check the lift on both of these, and we'll see where we at. What's the spec and where are these guys at? So let me show you how to set one of these up if you've never done one before. Okay, so it's making contact there. Now you don't want to, this is the actual rod right here that moves in and out, and that's connected obviously to the dial. We don't want to adjust that, but I'm going to loosen the second dial over here. That gives me the ability to spin the dial, and I can now set that arrow right at 0 or as close to it, as I can, right? Then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start rotating. So it should be staying at 0. And like I said, if I push on this table at all, I can make that needle move. So we can't be super duper extremely accurate, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay. we're going to see where we at. We started at 0. You can see right here our lift is beginning, right? Because you can see it move quite a bit. Okay, right there, there's 100 thousandths, 200 thousandths. Okay, it looks like it stopped. Now it's going back. So let's go back up here to the peak. What is this? We got 80, right? So we went around twice. So there's 100, 200. We're almost to the 300, right? But we haven't. So we're at 80, and I'm going to call that a 1. So we're going to call it 281. And then it starts going back down. It goes down 100, goes down 200, and then goes back down to 0, or pretty close to it. I may have moved this. Yeah, okay, so we're off by, let's say, 1 thousandths. So we need to take 1 thousandths off. Okay, so I think I saw that peak out at, let's say, 281. So let's call it 280. That's our max lift, 280 thousandths, which 250 thousandths is a quarter of an inch. So 280, that's just over a quarter of an inch. That's 0.28 inches. Okay. So let's now move this over to this guy. Okay, so we do want to make sure that, you want to make sure that once you actually attach this, see where it's sitting at right here? I want to see that needle physically move, right? When I push on it, I want to see it move. It doesn't need to move a ton, but I want to physically see it move. So that way I know I haven't, I'm not past the max extension. I know I'm going to get an accurate reading. Loosen this guy, we'll move this guy back. Get that as close as possible to 0. Okay, so we're right on 0. So we had 280 on this guy. What do we got on this guy? I'm going to try to move this over a little bit so I'm right in the middle. Okay, so we're starting out on this one also. We're about 1 thousandths off, maybe 2 thousandths off. Let's see what it does. There's 100, 200. Okay, so the peak right there I saw was 90. So this is 290 lift, right? Because as soon as I go any further, now it's starting to go back down. So we're going to call it 290. So I had 280 and then 290. Now it looks like I'm about 2 thousandths off, right? So we'll take 2 thousandths off of our peak, which is, so we'll call that 288. We'll call this 280 and 288. So let me mark that. We'll go 280. We'll do 288. Okay, now let's go look in the manual and see what is our lift on intake and exhaust. What is it supposed to be? All right, so what's nice about this guy, it's got a magnet so you can turn it on and turn it off. It just lowers and raises a magnet inside of there. As you can see, I just drilled a piece of metal onto there so it could stick onto it, so I had something to hang on to, right? So let's go take this guy, let's move him out of the way. I put gloves on because my hands are dirty and I want to try to keep the book clean. But here we go, right here. Includes engine, GMT, and that's the truck I have. It's a GMT 800. So let's look here. This is the actual. I think I showed it to you before, but this is the actual. Even goes through crankshaft balancer cleaning and inspection. Look, it even shows right here. GM recommends using Plastigauge to verify your bearing tolerances. So those of you that might be asking, use Plastigauge, you got to just do the math and measure. Well, Chevy says use Plastigauge. Let's find the LQ4 camshaft. 274, 281. Now, is it possible? Is it possible that my dial indicator here is kind of okay? Yeah, it's possible. Is it possible that there's actual oil buildup or material deposition on the actual camshaft, and that's what causes it to be a little different than what we're seeing? Possibly, but I wouldn't expect that big. 0.006 larger. I would expect, if anything, for it to be smaller than that. I would expect it to be after 500,000 miles, that it would not be 274. It might be 273 or 272, and maybe the 281, maybe it's 279, maybe a thousandths or two smaller in diameter. But the fact that it's larger than that tells me probably doesn't have a factory camshaft in it, or I'm sure it's a GM camshaft. But let's take a look at this and see if I can find a GM part number on it, because that would be the dead giveaway. They don't always stamp part numbers, but looking at it, man, that really does look like just a standard GM camshaft. It doesn't look like it's a super high-end, high-performance camshaft, but I'm not seeing any, you know what I'm saying? When you purchase an aftermarket camshaft, it'll say somewhere on there, it'll say Comp Cams, it'll be stamped on the back of there or something. Whatever brand you got, they're going to have it stamped on there somewhere with some kind of part number. So the fact there's no part number kind of makes me believe this is a GM camshaft. Now, is this maybe it's a high-end camshaft? Maybe is it a Camaro camshaft? I don't know. I'm going to need to look this up and see what camshafts had 280 and 288 intake and exhaust lift. Okay, so I did a quick search online, and I did find an example of someone else having a cam that they found in theirs that had the same 280, 288 lobe lift. That's not your duration, that's not your total lift. Your total lift, and that's generally how it's measured, using the proper cam lift tools with the cam in the truck with the lifter in there, and you use basically what you're doing is you're calculating how far does it actually open the actual valve inside the head. And so a lot of times when you look up cams, that's the spec that you're going to find. Everybody's talking about what's the lobe, what's the lift and duration. That's what they're talking about. They want to see how far does that cam lift, or not cam, how far does that valve open? And that's what they're talking about as far as lift. Total lift, which includes the actual diameter or lift of the lobe, plus the lifter, plus the push rod, plus the rocker. And the rocker arm, you can actually purchase those with their offset, and that'll create a ratio. So you can get 1.7s, 1.5s, 1.2s, 2.1s. You can get that, and that will actually cause, if it's moving, if this stays consistent and this is your fulcrum, your movement's going to be this. But if you move your fulcrum over here, it's going to be a lot less, right? Move it back here, suddenly you're getting the same amount of movement over here, but bigger movement over here, right? So your ratio of your rocker arm itself. So there's things that you can do to change that, right? So that's something you got to take into account if you're doing a full engine build and you're trying to figure out what pistons and what cam to run and things like that. How much total lift, right? That'll tell you how far the valves are pushing down towards the cylinders. So you know if you got to get cutout cylinders or if you can run flat cylinders or things like that. But finding that exact specification of the actual lobe lift on the cam, that can be something that's a little difficult to find. But I did find, and I'm going to show you right here, someone did find that did have, and they actually provided a GM part number. I looked up that GM part number, and the GM part number showed total lift. It didn't show actual lobe lift, but he had the exact same numbers that we have, which tells me that cam is like brand new, perfect condition. There's no abnormal wear on there. That's the lobes are worn down 0%. So as far as I'm concerned, you put that cam right back in and you're gonna get 100% factory performance out of the engine. Now, obviously, we'd probably want to go ahead and change out our gear here on the cam or crankshaft, change our cam gear, change the chain, just get some fresh parts in there that are nice and tight. But other than that, the cam, that sucker can go right back into the engine and be reused, no problem. It's, I mean, at least that one, you know, you'd have to check every single one of them to see if they're all the exact same. I'm sure they have a couple of them here and there, but if you had one that's a couple thousandths off, I'd probably go ahead and condemn that camshaft and just get you a new one. But I mean, from what we saw, the out around was right at about a thou, maybe plus or minus. I didn't really have the dial set exactly perfect. That was within spec, and then we could also see that the actual cam lobe lift was perfectly in spec. So it's pretty good. So the next thing we're gonna do, let's pull the pistons out. I want to take a look at these guys. I want to see what the cylinders look like. I want to see what the piston skirts look like. I want to measure the pistons, measure the cylinders. That bearing fell out. What does it look like on the inside? That actually looks pretty good. You know what I'm saying? They're teeny tiny. Perfect. Okay, we got all the pistons out. All we have left is literally just the block and the crankshaft. We did pull these, we pulled, I think it was this guy out, if I remember correctly. That was last week. That was a long time ago. We pulled this guy out and looked at we used the plastic gauge and checked the clearance on that, and it was within spec. So now, let's flip this guy over. I want to look at these cylinders to see what do these guys look like. Okay, perfect. You can see right here the extent of the cylinder travel. See where the cylinder wall actually changes color right here? The piston never went down further than that. There's, I don't know, an inch of cylinder that the piston never touched. So from that line right there to up here, now not all the way to the very, very tippy top. Look at it this angle. Right here, I don't know if you can see that, but right here, you can see another line of that same kind of brownish color right up here. So those rings only touch from just underneath the very tip of the top here, just down to that little spot down there in the middle. That's all of your wear is going to be in that specific location. Now, one of the things that you want to do, if you have an engine that's the cylinders are excessively worn out, is you will feel a ridge right here. You'll be able to catch it with your fingernail because the wall has worn down, and the factory OEM diameter will be right here at the very top, and it'll be right down here at the very bottom, because the piston has never touched those areas. So we can measure down here and see what the factory diameter is down here, and then we can measure all along up the cylinder in a couple, 2 or 3 different locations and feel how much wear we have. And I'll tell you, I see absolutely no cross-hatching, none. I can see the cross-hatching on the bottom in the areas where the piston never touched. And you can just see right where it ends. The cross-hatching isn't meant to stay there indefinitely. It's not like, oh, if the cross-hatching is gone, the engine's toast. No. The cross-hatching is simply there to help the rings seat quickly, right? You want them to wear, you want the cylinder walls and the rings on the piston to wear together and create a nice tight seal, and you want to do it quickly. And so the crosshatch, it helps them seat in quickly. It's the quickest way. They've, over the last, 150 years, they've been making cylinders pistons, right? Because you gotta think, even in like steam engines, like in trains, they still have pistons and they still have cylinders, right? So they've been doing this for a long, long time and figuring out what's the fastest way to get the rings to seat so it becomes 100% efficient, or as close to 100% efficient as possible. Cross-hatching is the best way to do it. 45-degree cross-hatch. I'm seeing like super faint cross-hatching on this side. But like, I mean, these suckers are mirror finish. Let's take an actual like little closer examination of these pistons. Quite a bit of carbon buildup around the piston ring, or the wrist pin area here. Okay, our two compression rings appear to be spinning freely. We're going to check the gap on those here in a minute to see what kind of gap. I bet you the rings are probably toast. Let's look at the oil ring. That's this third one. It looks like a cardboard, a side view of cardboard. Where's my ring pick? And that guy's feeling fairly stuck. He's absolutely 100% stuck. It should be able to spin around freely, just like these guys right here. Oh, we got a broken piston. Look at that. Look at that. We got a broken piston. No way. Look at that. Look at that. You see that? This little piece in the middle is going to come out. That's a broken piston. I wonder how long that piston's been broken. That piece still fits in there nicely. Let's get that apart. This is cylinder number 1. So you're pulling piston rings out. You want to be fairly gentle with them. They generally are made out of cast iron and not steel. And they will fracture. They will break for the most part. Just general rule of thumb. Just move you up a... Oh, the guy's going to try to come on out. Look at that. Look at that piece just came right on out. So let's be honest with... Let's talk realistically here for a second. Had this engine, and we're going to look at this, that broken piston ring here carefully, or the broken piston, I should say, carefully here in a second. I just want to get these rings out so we can examine the kind of the whole shooting match here. So look here, we have our dot in the piston ring right there. That tells you that that's the upward side. The opposite side of the piston ring doesn't have any dots or any markings of any kind. You it'll either have a dot, or it'll have like the manufacturer's logo or a letter or a number or something, and wherever that is, that's the side that faces up. They're not actually square across the face. They actually have angles ground into them to be more efficient, and so they have to go one way. If you go the other way, gases can actually blow right past them, and you've lost efficiency. Okay, so looking at this, let's look at this piece. We can get this guy closer. So look at this. See how grainy that structure is. There's no smoothness to it. The edges, I'm not seeing any smoothness to those either. It's very perfectly grainy. Is it possible that this was broken literally in the process of moving the engine or pulling the piston out? I kind of very highly doubt that. But I'll tell you this much, that piece never moved. I believe this is probably broken for quite a while, and this is why. But it was being squeezed in, goes this way, and held into place by the piston wall. It was not being allowed to move. This is why. Look at the color and look how it changes right at the fracture. If this had broken while we were pulling the engine apart
while we were disassembling it, moving the engine, whatever, this would all be the same color. We'd have the same black all the way around. If we look at this side of the piston, look at that. It's black all the way around, right? So the fact that this piece right here is that much cleaner tells me this has probably been broken for quite a while. It's been allowing oil and gases through and around this area, but because it was so, it was being held in by the cylinder walls, it wasn't allowed to move. So it didn't shift back and forth, up or down. If it had moved, there wouldn't be these very perfectly defined grain structure on here. That would have all been smoothed off, and it wouldn't be, you can see some slight areas where there is a little bit of flattening on some of these, but also if you look right inside of here, you can see some of that carbon buildup has actually worked its way down into this groove. Same on this side. So this has been broken for a fair amount of time. I was driving this truck around with a broken piston, had no idea. Now, let's see if we can get this oil. This is why the truck was burning oil. This is why it was low on power, low on, oh, there we go. There's the, I don't know if we'll get this guy out. There, stuck in there. Not supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to spin freely, like I was saying before, just like the compression rings. Not compression rings. Okay, so got that guy off. Not in the most glorious manner. Is that? Oh, there you are. Okay. Work our way around. Let's get that guy off. These ones are generally steel. They won't fracture, but they will bend. Okay, now this guy, who even knows? See now how suddenly now that guy will spin around? Oh, there we go. Okay. That guy is just chocked full of crud. Just chock full. This valley, these are called lands. These are called valleys. I know, super high-end technical engine information, but look at how much gunk is in there. That's just blow by right there. That's what's going to cause that right there. Let's look at the piston skirts. Let's look at these guys. Okay. So now pistons like this are turned on a lathe. They're chucked up, spinning around, whoosh, and they get a cutting tool, comes in here, meep, meep, and then cuts the valleys, and then they pop it off. So you will have a, I don't know if you can see that, but you will have a textured, but you can see right here, perfectly smooth. And you can also see there's a coloration difference. You can see how the little lines, and then you can see right here it's perfectly smooth. Different colorations. We did have piston slap going on right here. So this portion of the piston was actually riding up, and it was actually touching and riding the wall. And you don't really want that. Causes additional friction, additional heat. The rings are supposed to seat in there tightly enough that it keeps that piston centered. Okay, same with this side. You can see that coloration. There's a good angle right there. You can see the coloration difference between here, here, and here, varying levels of wear. This, the lightest color right here is perfectly smooth, and as you move out, you can feel the ridges from the machining. If you can hear it. Over here. So, I mean, like I said, it's a 500,000 mile engine. I wasn't expecting to find something that was just brand new with no wear and nothing messed up. No, I was expecting to find things like this. The next thing we're going to do, So we have, that is cylinder number 1, which this right here is also cylinder number 1. Driver's side, front of the engine, driver's side, this is the left, that's the right. Cylinder number 1. So, let's get this up here so you can see it. This is what you do. Whether it's brand new engine or like this, we're just going to check an old engine. We're going to look right here. There's our dot, so we know that that side's facing up. And we're going to put this ring inside the cylinder like this. Now, you have to make sure that the ring isn't sitting in there cockeyed. It needs to be perfectly flat, and you want to make sure the ends are, even. So a quick, easy way to do that, take your piston, right, turn it upside down, and just push it in, just a little bit. Now you know it's flush and flat and even. You want it to be as close to the top as possible because this is where the least amount of wear occurs. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab some feeler gauges and we're going to measure this gap right here. We'll do that on both piston rings, the compression rings. And a lot of times back in the day, they had an upper compression ring, lower compression ring, and it mattered which one went on there. And it'll generally tell you, there'll be a 1 or a 2 or a T for the top and B for bottom, something like that. They'll give you some kind of indication, or you might have a circle on one and a triangle on the other, and there'll be a piece of paper that comes with your new rings, and it'll say the triangle one goes on top and the circle one goes on the bottom, whatever. But if they're both marked exactly the same, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one's the top or the bottom. They're using the same edge profile on both of them. So let me grab my feeler gauges real quick. We'll measure this, and then we'll check it according to specs, and we'll see how far off is this. I'm gonna guess. I'm throwing this out there. Probably quite a bit. All right, we got our feeler gauges. We got our feeler gauges here. There we go. Okay, it's fairly thicker. I'm gonna say 20 thou, 21 thou. Oh, it fits in there. Easy. 24 thou. Oh, hot dog down a hallway. 28 thou. Yup. 30, 32. Okay, 32. We're just starting to feel the slightest bit of resistance. Here's 35. That's the thickest one that I got. Oh, okay. I can still see how I can weeble wobble it left and right. No. Okay, so we're gonna have to take 35 and we're gonna have to add. Let's add 3 thousandths to it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this 3 thousandths, carefully because these are all the paper thin ones, right? We'll take our 3 thousandths, make sure it's clean, right? So you'll add a thou or two if you're not clean. Okay, put those two together. So I have 35 plus 3 makes it 38. Okay. Wow. So 3 wasn't enough. Let's jump it up to 10. There's 6, 7, 8. There's a brass 10. Let's go with the steel 10. Okay, so here's 45. Okay, it's less than 45. So let's do this 7. The thing is, I can physically fit that between the gap. It's very tight, so it's probably not a 7. Let's go with a 6. At that point in time, we're smushing stuff. 6 is still a little bit tight, so let's go with 8, 7, there's 5. Let's go 5 thousandths. So this is 40 thousandths. Okay. I'm going to call it that one. I'm going to call it 40 thousandths on the ring gap. Let's check this guy and see if this guy has the same. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also the same. Very, very close. $40 thousandths. That's This one's looser. I could throw that 40 thousandths in there like it's nothing. I could probably fit 46. We could probably do 46, but let's call it 45. 40 and 45. That was the two rings. 40 and 45. Let's check the manual. What does the manual say? What's factory? Unit repair, I think it was just before unit repair. We had specifications, yep, right here. Okay, LQ4, we got the right one here. Let's see, connecting our crankshaft, piston, outside diameter, piston out around. Okay. Piston ring, piston oil. Okay, here we go. Service top, service second. So they do have the top and the bottom are different. Because otherwise they would just say ring 1, ring 2, or whatever. But the fact that they specifically call it out as a top and a second, that means that they are different. They have a different profile. Okay, here's production. That's what we want right here. Oil ring, compression ring, second. So we got right here, compression ring, end gap, production, top. So this is going to be new specification. Brand new, 16 thousandths. Second, brand new, 26 thousandths. This is, and then this is service. So this is going to be maximum. This is the production is what it came from the factory or what it's set at when the engines are being built. And then service means this is the service limit. Anything beyond this, it's worn out and needs to be thrown away. Okay, so top maximum is 18, let's call it 19 thousandths. Second maximum, 32 thousandths. So we are way, way past service limits on both of those. That's not something unexpected to me. We're at 40 and 45. So I'm gonna assume the smaller one, we're gonna call that the top one, was 40. And the service limit is 19. The bottom one was 45. We're gonna call it the bigger one, we'll call that the bottom one. Service limit was 29 thousandths. It was 45. So that one, both of them are completely way out. We could go through and we could measure the oil ring. doesn't matter. And we can measure the groove clearances on the actual piston, groove depth, all of those things. We could do all that. I'm not super concerned about that. We know that this engine was worn out, but because of the rings being that far out, next thing I want to do is I want to measure the bores, right? And so right here we can see what is our bore diameter. Cylinder bore diameter production. We're going to call that 4 inches on the dot. 4 inches, and they're allowed 7/10,000ths of an inch variance. So 4 inches exactly, or 4 inches and 1/1000. So it should be exactly 4 inches on the dot, nothing else. So let's measure that real quick. We know we're looking for 4 inches. Okay, so to measure the cylinder, okay, we're gonna be using two different tools. We're gonna use a micrometer. There's a 4-inch to 5-inch micrometer. And everybody calls these different things. I call them T gauges, T-bars. They're technically inside micrometers, but whatever. So how it works is the end of this right here, you can see there's a little gap right there. The end of this is a setting screw. You loosen that, and then now these rods on the ends, I don't want to let them fly out of there. I don't know if they will. No, okay. They won't fall out. They extend and retract. And so what you do is you put it inside, set it, and then it holds that exact position. Then you can come in here and use your micrometer to measure the whatever it was. So we're gonna loosen this. We're gonna set it inside of here. We're gonna start at the very top. I'm gonna do 3 measurements. We're gonna start at the very top, just underneath what would potentially be the ring groove on the top. We're gonna go just inside of that, right? And what I like to do, this is what I was shown this by a machinist friend of mine, is you start with it not parallel, right? Don't worry about trying to make it parallel. Start with it not parallel, tighten it gently, pull it out. Now, because it's been tightened gently, it's not going to move. You can go ahead and add a little bit just to make sure it's not. But look at this. It is, I mean, so freaking perfect. I'm having a difficult time getting it back inside the cylinder. Exactly. Okay. So we were able to just pull it out, and that makes it quick. Now you have to, I'll do this again, and we'll walk our way through it. Okay. Whoop, whoop, get back on there. Okay. So let me do it on this. Let's move a cylinder where that camera is straight up and down on it. Let's go this guy right here. Okay. Okay. So we got it in there, right? Now the thing is, you could be off-centered, let's say this way. There, that's better. Now you guys can see, you get the camera angle lined up with the angle to the left, right, whatever. Okay, so you can obviously, if you look at this, you could be too far to this side, and that's going to make your diameter smaller. You could be too far to this side, that's going to make your diameter smaller. You could be off this way, your diameter is going to be off. You could be off this way, your diameter is going to be off. So you have to be perfectly straight up and down and perfectly centered in the cylinder in order to get an accurate reading, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to do that little method, right? Now you can lock that thing down and it ain't going to move, but that's not what we want, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use my finger on this side to set one side and not allow it to move. So we're going to start too far. This right now is currently too wide. It is wider than the cylinder. Now I'm going to just give it a slight tighten, hold this side, and as I pivot it back, it's going to overcome the tightening of this, and it's going to physically squeeze it down. Now, I didn't clamp it tight, just slightly tight. See this? I was able to get another quarter turn out of it before that was fully tight, but it was tight enough that it was going to not move, right? Now, if I come back and try to redo this, you can see like that's pretty much exactly right on. Now, I messed up, and you can see how I didn't let this bar out all the way? It's not going to be an accurate. Okay, so I'm going to hold this side. Well, now I'm going to go back to this cylinder. I want to measure everything on this cylinder. We could go through and measure every single cylinder. That's just going to take forever. But we're going to start with it here, try to have it centered as much as possible. We're going to make sure our angle is off intentionally. We're going to lightly tighten this. I'm going to use this finger here to hold this pivoted up against the cylinder so it doesn't move. And then I'm just going to do in a nice, clean, quick motion. If you do things slow, they won't tend to like self-center or kind of get themselves where they're supposed to be. Nice and quick and clean motion. We're out. And now that thing is set at its proper spot. Now we'll go ahead and turn that. We'll give it another little quarter turn. As you can see, I made sure it's out on both sides. Now if I go to try to put this back in, you can see it's actually going to be very difficult for me to get it straight up and down perfectly enough to get it to where it aligns. And I can't move it off to the sides. It's spot on. Okay. So we're going to take this side, we're going to plant it onto this guy here, and we're going to run this guy in. So 0 would be 4 inches. Okay, well, we're definitely past 4 inches. Okay, that's tight right there. It's literally holding it perfectly parallel. So that's tight. That's exactly whatever the inside diameter measurement was. Now, we're gonna look at this bad boy right here. Can you see that? Okay, right there. We are 4.5 thousandths over. So 4.5 thousandths wear at the top. What does it look like further down? We're going to do the same thing. Generally speaking, the cylinder wears the least up here and wears the most down here, generally speaking. So we're going to go about halfway down, right? About halfway down. I'm going to offset it. She's been a little sticky. All right. About halfway down. Okay. Nope, it's exactly the same. Just barely. Okay, it's exactly the same. We're still sitting right at that one's right at 4 thousandths. Let's do it at the very bottom. The bottom of the stroke, so you know how I was showing you before, like you could see that line down at the very bottom where the rings physically never touched below that. I'm going to be just above that line on the inside there, right? Okay. Oh, look at that. That's way too much difference. Something didn't go quite right. Okay. Less wear. 1 thousandths on the bottom. 1 thousandths, 1.5 thousandths wear on the bottom of the cylinder, 4 thousandths wear on the top. So we had more wear up here towards the top than we did down to the bottom. That's interesting. Okay, so we're looking for cylinder bore. It just shows production. It doesn't show like a minimum or maximum. Right, like these, it'll show a minimum or maximum. So I'm going to say their recommendation is 4 inches, and you're allowed 1 thousandths. Anything over 1 thousandths, right? Because it'll come in here and it'll show you, like we looked right here, production top, right? And it gave us a specification, and we turned the page, and we go over here, service limit top, right? So it's not giving a specific service limit, and that's okay. That's one of the things that you may not know. When you purchase rings, right, for your engine, when you go buy engine rings, when they show up, they're going to be what you call too long. And so if you go to put it in there, they may actually physically touch. And you have to take a file and file these and then put them back in, and you put it in and you measure it with your feeler gauges, and then you file it and measure it and file it and measure it until you get you use that feeler gauge and you grind the gap wider and wider until it reaches that specification, right? The top 16 thousandths. So you would grind that until that gap is 16 thousandths. So you could have a cylinder wall that's obviously worn down, right? We could just take this and use one of those dingle ball honers and clean these cylinders up, make them look brand new, shiny. They have new cross hatches in there. There's only like, it's 4 thousandths over basically the entire, and then go buy a new set of rings, right? They will be too long. We'll put them in there and we'll file the gap in there until we got a 16,000, they'll start like this and we'll file them out until we got a 16 thousandths gap. Put those on the pistons, slap those in there. Your compression ratio just came back to 100% of what it was originally. Is that the best way to rebuild it? No, but can you do it that way? Yeah, absolutely you can. So with that being said, this engine, obviously, we've checked it. The camshaft is absolutely perfect, like brand new perfect. The bearing surfaces are perfect. The lobe lifts are exactly spot on.
The crankshaft, we checked that. We checked the bearing clearances on that. That was in spec. And like I said before, when I pulled this engine out, it had perfectly fine oil pressure. There wasn't like, didn't have like super low oil pressure. So that tells you your bearings are fine. There's everything's still kind of within spec as long as your oil pressure is kind of remaining in like normal operational ranges. So I knew the bearings were probably fine, right? But yeah, it just was low on horsepower. Well, that's because the rings were just worn out, just plumb wore out. So when this engine goes back together, she's getting new pistons, she's getting new rings. I'm gonna bore this out, right? We're gonna get this back to a factory because there is a taper between the top and the bottom. The bottom is narrower than the top. The cylinders are kind of shaped like this. Now I'm exaggerating it heavily. It's, you know, 1/1000ths down here, 4/1000ths up here. So there's 3/1000ths difference between the top and the bottom. But that would be something that you'd have to take into consideration if you were going to use, if you were just going to throw new rings and new pistons in this thing, some new bearings, put it back together and run it, right? Like maybe you don't have a ton of money and you're just like, hey, I just want to get this thing as good as I can and then just keep running it because that's what I got. Then I would do, obviously we're going to have to replace at least one piston, right? Because it's broken. We're gonna need to check all the other pistons and see if any of the other ones are broken. But if you just got one broken ring, just get one factory sized ring, not an oversized or piston, one factory sized piston, not an oversized piston, right? New set of rings, gap those rings for at the very bottom, wherever it's the tightest, right? So if it's only 1/1000ths off factory down here, and it's 4/1000ths off up here, then we're gonna need to set our gap tolerance or gap clearance for down here, for that 1/1000ths out, and then put it all back together, throw new bearings on everything, and this thing, fire it up, and the thing will run great. Reseal it so it's not leaking oil, clean it up, you know, nice, and you're good to go. And you would be out a set of bearings, which is cheap. I think you can get a set of bearings for this thing for probably under $100. A set of rings for this thing for under $100. If all you did was change like one piston for a factory piston, probably under $100. You could probably do a you know, dingle ball hone, new bearings, new rings, put it back together, right? Just clean it up, put it back together and run. $300-400. And that's like, I need to buy a piston. If I didn't need to buy a piston and it was just like, let's just go through here, clean this all up, dingle ball hone this and just put all new bearings and rings in this thing and then put it back together and run it. Couple $100, $200, and you know, maybe a couple weekends, right? I mean, we spent an entire weekend basically tearing it down. Now I was going through measuring everything specifically, but that's what you'd be doing on something like this too, because you need to know what's my reusability on these components, right? How are these looking? Can I reuse these, right? So that's what you'd be doing, the same kind of thing. Checking each of these, top, middle, bottom, top, middle, bottom, top, middle, bottom, and then you're going to have to file your rings to fit that specific cylinder, that specific piston, that, you know, you wouldn't be able to file the ring and then ended up moving it to somewhere else. You have to, cylinder number one rings, that's cylinder number one, number two, number three, and work your way around. All new bearings, put it together, so, you know, new gaskets and new seals, new head gaskets and whatnot, and it's rocking and rolling. So I think that's going to do it. This to me was very eye-opening how well this engine has held up at 500,000 miles. 40 years ago, back when they had just the good old-fashioned V8, you know, the 350 V8, you wouldn't have gotten 500,000 miles out of it. Now, I will say one more thing. There's guys out there, and this is just a little pet peeve of mine, okay? There's guys out there, they get an engine, they're like, I need to get this thing rebuilt. And the first thing in their mind is bore it out, right? You got to bore it out. And they want to go 30 over, 50 over, right out of the gate. The amount of horsepower gains, potential earned gains off of immediately going to 30,000ths over, 50,000ths over, whatever the maximum you can get out of it. Generally 30, 40 is on pretty much most things. That's just kind of like a general rule of thumb. Like that's the end. That's the limit. You really can't go beyond that. You start making the walls too thin and run the risk of cracking and coolant, you know, and basically ruining the block. But they immediately go 30, 40,000, just right off the bat. Like, oh, hey, let's rebuild the engine, 40,000ths over, 40,000 pistons, right? And then a thought process thinking like, oh yeah, I can get an extra few
cubic inches of displacement out of this engine. The cubic inches of displacement that you get out of the engine doing something like that is so minuscule. Okay, I need you to just think about this. 30 thousandths of an inch. It takes 250 thousandths of an inch to create a quarter of an inch. Okay, you're gonna go from an exact 4-inch diameter exact. You saw the book, 4 inches exactly to 4.003 or 4.03 inches. 4.03, not 4.3, 4.03. That's such a small change in diameter, you're not getting tons of extra horsepower. All you're doing is you're taking this engine block, this is a perfect example, 500,000 miles, we have 4 thousandths wear on the cylinder walls. I could do 10 thousandths, right? You generally do it in 10 thousandths increments. So we could do 10 thousandths, do 10 thousandths over pistons, 10 thousandths over rings, put this thing all back together with the original camshaft, the original lifters, the original everything, clean everything really well, get all the scuzz and get it back to nice and bright and shiny, put it back together, run it for another 500,000 miles, pull it everything back apart, then do 20 over piston, 20 over rings, put everything back together, run it again for another 500,000 miles, then pull it back apart, then do 30 over, then do 30 over pistons, 30 over rings, 30 over, run it again for another 500,000 miles. Now we're at 1.5 million miles on this one engine block. And each time you're able to just rebuild it, repair it for minimal cost and keep running it. And then maybe you can get 40 out of these. I don't know. I'd have to double check it. But just going from a factory, oh, it's got 4 or 5 thousandths, spec. Yeah, it's bore at 30 over. Yeah, it's bore at 30 over. You don't need to do that. If you want more horsepower out of this, increase your compression ratio. That's very simple to do. With this engine right here from the factory, it's got what's called dish top pistons. As you can tell, there's a dish right here. Okay, the LQ4 engine specifically for these 6 liters had the dish top pistons. The LQ9, which was found in the Cadillac Escalade, this is a 305 horsepower, or maybe it's 300, or it was pretty much exact. Let's just call it 300. 300 horsepower engine, flat top pistons. The difference between the 300 horsepower LQ4 and the 350 horsepower LQ9 was the LQ9 had flat top pistons. It's perfectly flat on the top. It's not dished. They had a higher compression ratio. 50 horsepower is gained simply by changing the piston from this dish top to a flat top. Okay? That's 50 horsepower. You're not going to get 50 horsepower going 30 over right off the bat. That's not going to give you 50 horsepower. So now imagine if you just threw flat top pistons in your engine, boom, 50 horsepower. Maybe throw a mild cam in there, maybe get a little head work done, change your rockers out so you can get some different geometry rockers, right? Suddenly you're at 400 horsepower. You got a 100 horsepower increase. You did piston, cam, maybe a little head work, but not really much. You could easily get 100 horsepower out of this engine. If all you did was bore this out 30 over and did all of that other same stuff, flat top pistons and the cam and all that, everything else, guess what? You're still gonna be sitting at like 400 horsepower. Only now you have 406 horsepower instead of 400. You see what I'm saying? And in the grand scheme of things, 6 horsepower ain't gonna make a bit of difference. Trust me, you can't feel 6 horsepower, okay? Riding lawnmower has like 6 horsepower. Okay, whatever. So, there's a 500,000 mile engine on the inside. That's what it looks like. We got this thing all tore down. I'm gonna leave the crank in there. It's the safest place for the crank to be. It's bolted in, can't fall out. It's nice and smooth and taken care of, and nothing bad can happen to it. Okay, I've been ranting and raving long enough. Don't bore your engines out 30 over, 40 over right away. You're not going to get that much extra horsepower. It's not going to make it's not going to make that difference. Okay? For the people that it might make that kind of difference are people that are like extremely high performance. We're talking like top fuel drag racers are sitting there trying to calculate, like, if we bore this cylinder out an extra 3 thousandths of an inch, we're going to get exactly 1.17% higher torque at 14,000 RPMs, which means instead of the car going 329 miles an hour, it'll go 329.3 miles an hour. Yes, let's bore it out that extra 3/1000 of an inch. We're going to decrease the strength of the block by 14.2%, which means instead of getting 17 runs out of the block, we're only going to get 16 runs out of the block, but that's a price I'm willing to. Those are the people that are going to get a gain out of just boring it out as big as humanly possible. You and me, drag strip street guys, just a good old gearhead that's just cruising around. You're not going to get that extra performance. You can get all of that performance that you would get from being 30 over as opposed to 10 over on a bolt-on set of nice headers will give you more horsepower than that extra boring out will. Okay, so that's all I'm trying to say. So don't ruin engines just willy-nilly. Bore it out 10 over, use it. Bore it out another 10 over, use it. Bore it out another 10 over, use it. Bore it out another 10 over, use it. You get more life out of it. You're not just blowing money and just wasting money just to, I don't know, sound cool. That's all it really comes down to. Oh yeah, this engine's bored out 45,000 over, and everybody's like, no, you can't do that. Are you sure? Yep. Look, here's the receipt. Oh, he did do it 45,000 over. How many miles you got on this car? 14. Okay. On the way home from the meet, you see him stuck on the side of the road. You're like, what happened? Well, I blew the engine. Yes, because you bored it out 45,000 over. So basically all that money, that $20,000 you just spent on some crazy, ridiculous build just because you just threw it away. You just threw it away. You don't need to do that. You could have just bored it 10 over, put the same nice parts in it, ran it, and then 500,000 miles later, you'd still be driving it. I'm done ranting. Or am I? All right, so next week, we got more projects. We got more projects coming up next week, and so stay tuned. To be honest with you, I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't quite gotten that far. Do we start the mini jet boat build? Kind of want to. Summer's quickly approaching, and I'd really like to have something to take out on the lake. Or do we fix something else around the house? I don't know. Also, what am I going to do with this engine? Do I rebuild this engine? Do I convert it to an LQ9 or maybe even to something a little more? Get some more extra horse torques and put this back in Emily? Put the original engine back into Emily? Maybe. Or what if I put this in something else? What if I just, I don't know. Let me know. What should I do with this? Should I do an LS conversion on something? Should I go buy an old square body Chevy and do an LS conversion on it? And soup this thing up and turbocharge it and just go all out on it? I don't know. Let me know. Maybe there's, there might be an old, Dodge Duster out there. 70s Dodge Duster or International Travelall that just needs to have an LS conversion. And we got her sitting right here. Let me know in the comments down below, what should I do with this 500,000 mile engine? Hey, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for checking out this engine with me. And I hope you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your weekend. Catch you next week.